Ukraine, the United States, and Russia will hold a new round of peace negotiations, where and when they will take place, and how Trump is thinking about withdrawing from the peace talks. We'll talk about this with Oleksandr Kraiev, expert at Ukrainian Prism think tank, senior lecturer at Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. Oleksandr, glad to see you, and thank you for joining us.
Great, thank you for having me.
Oleksandr, with the US elections approaching, peace negotiations to end the war between Ukraine and Russia may be at risk. According to The Atlantic, the possible withdrawal of the US leader from the diplomatic process increases the risk of derailing the peace dialogue and puts additional pressure on Kyiv. A decision could be made in the coming weeks. Do you believe that Trump might withdraw from the negotiation process? And what do you think about this?
Generally speaking, this risk is always present there because this is Trump, actually. To cut a long story short, he is always on the brink of just ceasing any activity when it comes to Russia aggression against Ukraine. He is always at the last step of his, as he say, cautious ladder, and he always can withdraw from this type of negotiations and basically from any kind of foreign policy activities. But we always should remember that this is a part of his narrative strategy. That's a part of his informational agenda. Basically, he tries to present himself and to an extent sell himself as an asset, as something as valuable and as necessary for both sides of the war, that the risk of losing him is much bigger than it really is. So I do believe that yes, such risk is omnipresent, especially with elections lurking around. But at the same time, for him personally, I mean Trump, of course, and for his position, this withdrawal is kind of illogical to an extent. Because on the one hand, we do understand that everything that Trump is doing currently, especially with foreign policy, is one way or another directed at the April's meeting with Xi Jinping in China. And being weak or being undecisive on the issues of Russia and Ukraine will, of course, present Trump as being weak and undecisive. And I don't think that is something that he wants to show China. That's not something that he wants to show Xi personally. He wants to present a stronger position. He wants to show himself as a great diplomat, communicator, politician, etc., etc. So leaving negotiation at this point in time will not benefit him personally and will not benefit him politically. As I said at the beginning, that's just his narrative building strategy. That's just something to upend his stakes, to present him as an inalienable part of the success of the negotiation, and just to brag about the price and to make the price bigger for him, especially image price, especially publicity price. So basically, he's just working with his own image there.
Oleksandr, we saw that the next round of talks on Ukraine will take place soon in Geneva. A Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, has said. According to him, the negotiations will be held in a trilateral format: Russia, the US, and Ukraine. The Russian delegation will be led by Russian presidential aide Vladimir Medinsky. Previous rounds have effectively hit a deadlock. How the negotiating positions of the parties changed since the last meeting? If so, in what ways? What should we expect?
As of now, we do not see any substantial changes. Basically speaking, we do not see any changes at all when it comes, for example, to Russian side. However, at the same time, we see a lot of news articles and we hear a lot of rumors indicating that probably the Ukrainian position has slightly changed. And to that extent, we do see these new talks about the possible referendum on the parts of Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast being transferred to Russia. We see these talks about the possibility generally of the election coming this May. I'm still not convinced that these talks are a real thing. I still think these talks are all about just keeping Trump and Americans entrenched with this process and just keeping them interested in the outcome, because we do understand that for Americans, any outcome will be a success. It doesn't matter for them which specific outcome there is. At least when it comes to the ceasefire agreement, because it's not about something bigger than a ceasefire, I believe. And that also can be considered a change in the position, but at this time on the American side. Previously, as you remember, both the State Department and the White House, they were all talking about substantial strategic level negotiations concerning a peace agreement and a peace deal. But now we're mostly talking about ceasefire. The Americans are mostly talking about the basic rules of engagement for this ceasefire agreement, and they're mostly talking about something preliminary, something as a starting point for a more strategic negotiation to take place in the future, and for them to take part in. So the change on Ukrainian side is mostly informational. So basically, we're just portraying ourselves as trying to change this position. But at the end of the day, I don't think that the referenda or election will take place. The change on the American side is just scaling down their anticipation from the results of this negotiation. And unfortunately, there are no changes on Russian side. However, that is something quite anticipated because of the Gromyko-style diplomacy that the Russian Foreign Ministry and Kremlin are still using to this day.
Mm-hmm. And if we're talking about elections, we saw that President Volodymyr Zelensky denied a Financial Times report that he planned to announce presidential elections and referendum on February 24th. We understand that territory, it's a big question, and according to data from the Kyiv Security Forum, 33% of Ukrainians are convinced that peace with Russia is only possible after the complete liberation of Ukrainian's territory within its 1991 borders. How do you personally interpret peace at this stage?
Well, that's the problem for me personally. I do not see any possibility for a substantial peace negotiation or substantial peace regime or peace and security reality being introduced, because unfortunately Russia is still existing. Russia is still there, and until Russia is still here, we should anticipate any kind of backstabbing, any kind of the threats, any kind of the new aggression coming about. Maybe not militarily one, but for sure a hybrid one, an informational, a political or economic incursion. So basically, until we have this problem with Russia being what it is, no substantial peace agreement is possible. However, we of course can talk about increasing our resilience, our adaptability, and our toughness. Basically, the idea for Ukraine here is to become a tough nut to crack for Russian foreign policy, and basically made it impossible for them to start an aggression similar to that started at the February 24th at 2022. And how that could be achieved? Well, of course, a ceasefire regime will be a first stepping stone to it, but after the ceasefire, the real work will just begin, because we should understand that Ukraine, maybe not now, but strategically speaking, must do anything in its power and anything in its capability to join NATO or to create any other alliance with nuclear-wielding states in order to preserve this nuclear umbrella above our heads. And the basic idea for Ukraine here is just to get something that will prevent Russia from using this ultimate argument. Apart from that, of course, Ukrainian army, Ukrainian armed forces and its society, we have proven many times that we can withstand any type of non-nuclear and non-weapons of mass destruction using aggression on the side of the Russian Federation. However, it is better for our economy and for our population to prevent any such aggression. And to that extent, we should be ready to develop a self-sustainable industrial military complex, to develop a good level of relations with our region neighbors, with our partners from Western Europe, with our partners from basically anywhere on the globe, and just to create a system of cooperation of industry and of defense and deterrence that will prevent any kind of Russian aggression, because it will just up the price of such an aggression. that mainly entangles this plan by Ursula von der Leyen of creating a steel porcupine out of Ukraine, with Ukrainian armed forces being the main needle of this porcupine. This also entangles the so-called Israel scenario, when Ukraine is infused with resources, money, weapons, whatever aid necessary by the partners in order to make Ukraine invincible to any foreign aggression. So basically, this combination of searching for a nuclear deterrent, creating a self-sustainable industrial military complex, creating a vast network of security alliances and military deterrence will, at the end, create a situation where when new aggression, unfortunately, is still possible, but very, very unlikely because of the cost it will induce upon the aggressor state.
Oleksandr, you mentioned nuclear states. After the US temporarily paused the transfer of intelligence to Ukraine in 2025, Europe began searching for a plan B as it became convinced of Washington's unreliability. Bloomberg reports this discussion also concerns the US nuclear umbrella over Europe. If Washington can no longer be trusted, Europe could face being left alone against Russia, which possesses the world's largest nuclear arsenal. Is it realistic that European capitals might consider establishing their own nuclear deterrent structures if confidence in the American nuclear umbrella is lost? What specific Plan B options are European leaders discussing to guarantee the continent's security without full dependence on the US?
Unfortunately, I do not see any substantial move towards a self-sustainable or strategically autonomous Europe, but I do believe that this concept of strategic autonomy will be something that will provide for real European power to stop any kind of Russian aggression, not only against itself, but also against Ukraine. So I do believe that the talks that are currently going on are definitely necessary, but they are only the starting point. Unfortunately, Europe has already wasted more than 3 years of Russian aggression against Ukraine. During this period, they could have done more, they could have done better when it comes to talking to their societies about the possible threats, when it comes to providing more investments to their military industrial complex, when it comes to decoupling from the United States, because we see the United States is not as a reliable partner as it previously. So basically, Europe has a lot of things to do apart from just talking about the possible nuclear deterrence to Russia, because even on the level of non-nuclear and non-weapons of mass destruction level of deterrence, they still lack a lot. As an example, you do remember as just a year ago when Trump first started talking about withdrawing not only part of its forces from Romania, but just generally withdraw American forces from the eastern flank of NATO, what a conundrum there was in the European politics, what a shock it was for a lot of Europeans that the Americans are getting serious about withdrawing from the European theater of war. But that's something Trump was talking about not during even last election. He was talking about withdrawing from Europe starting 2017, and especially in 2018 after his first meeting with NATO leaders. So basically, that's something that should have been anticipated. That's something that could have been predicted, basically. But unfortunately, we do see these problems with the Europeans that in many cases, on many occasions, they are still lagging behind on their commitments, even to themselves personally.
Oleksandr, some argue that the world needs an alternative to the American and Chinese models, and that European leaders must master the courage to chart their own course. What practical steps must Europe take to genuinely reduce its dependence on the US and China in economic and security spheres?
Well, if we speak about the possible conflict, which from my perspective is already on the go between US and China, and if we speak about such a conflict, we're speaking mostly about it in the terms of the new Cold War. We're speaking about the high-profile political, economic, and even ideological strife between the two parts. I do believe that even here Europe can play a bigger part, because on the one hand, we do understand that withdrawing from Europe for the Americans is a part of their strategy against China. It's about upping their support or their cooperation with the allies in the Pacific region. That's a part of the strategy of creating more defense opportunities for themselves. It's something, by the way, that Elbrich Holby, the Deputy Secretary of War for Political Affairs, have said many, many times. And even in his latest book, The Strategy of Denial, that's one of the main concepts. And I quote that any HIMARS, Abrams, or Patriot sent to Europe is a HIMARS, Abrams, or Patriot wasted in a possible war against China. So there is a big chunk of the American establishment who are not only concerned about Chinese influence, but they truly believe that the war with China is inevitable. And that is why they should abandon Europe in order to prepare for this direct confrontation with China. And in that regard, if the American establishment perceives this confrontation is unavoidable, I do think that for Europeans and even for Ukrainians, a very big strategic opportunity arises. We can be a necessity, not a liability, but a necessity for Americans in this new type of warfare, because who else, apart from Ukrainians, understands the modern type of drone warfare or hybrid warfare or any other type of the frontline realities of the 21st century better than Ukrainian servicemen and Ukrainian personnel, who can provide more high-grade and high-tech weapons than the European suppliers who have their product battle-tested on Ukrainian front line. So basically, that's the idea for this new type of alliance, something that the Americans are calling NATO 3.0, when the Europeans and all the other allies can provide more, but not on their home front. But they can provide more even in dealing with China, even in dealing with these big threats and these big security concerns of the 21st century. So I do believe we have a kind of a puzzle to solve here, because on the one hand, the United States withdrawing from Europe is a catastrophe, but on the other hand, it also provides for a lot of opportunities, and it provides for a lot of opportunities even when it comes for security cooperation and new security agreements. But we should not only think within our regional status of affairs, we should also think globally. And in this global thinking, we definitely should do something about helping the Americans stop the Chinese invasive thoughts in far eastern regions of our globe.
More about China, Foreign Minister Sybiga said that China supports Ukrainians' territorial integrity and sovereignty. He made this statement after meeting with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. To what extent does China's declaration of support of Ukrainians' territorial integrity and sovereignty have practical substance beyond diplomatic rhetoric? What role could China play in the negotiation process, considering that it also supports Russia?
China is the only one who can stop Russia, and without making any additional moves on their side. China is the only one who can say to Russia to stop its offense, to stop any kind of the aggressive movements against Europe, against Ukraine, against any other of their neighbors, because China holds the biggest stakeholder part in all of the Russian federal projects, in all of the Russian economy, in all of the Russian offensive capabilities. Basically, China is one step from getting the full economic control over Russian military and industrial capabilities. And that is why I do believe that it is a task for American diplomacy to convince China that helping Russia is no longer a valid asset for them, because before that we did see that China make a lot of successes, let's put it that way, even make a lot of successes from Russian aggression, because West become disunited. West spent billions and billions of dollars on equipment and microfinancial support to save Ukraine, but at the same time, West still remained at large a very non-competitive and a very feeble foe, because they were not able to present Ukraine enough materials, enough resources to acquire victory against Russian Federation. They did not present Ukraine strong enough guarantees to prevent the Russian assault. So basically, for China, Russian aggression against Ukraine is a test field, for a possible aggression against Taiwan, because judging from how West will react to Russian aggression against Ukraine, China may predict how the West will react to a possible aggression or any other kind of intervention of Chinese People's Republic towards Taiwan. So basically, for a long time, we did see that China used this opportunity to weaken the West, to support Russia as this battling ram to destroy the Western connectivity and to destroy the collective West spirit that was present there. But now we do see that China is losing its momentum. China is losing even some interest, to a biggest point, because China is under constant threat of tariffs and sanctions because of Russia. Supporting Russia, providing Russia with foreign markets and providing Russia with financial and economic support presents bigger risks than benefits for People's Republic of China. They can find cheaper oil and cheaper natural gas or cheaper forestry somewhere else. China has all the opportunities in the world to find these new contracts and to find these better connections. But dealing with Russia presents an entire set of threats in the relations with the European Union, when China is trying to create a new trading pact with the Europeans. Chinese relations with Russia also present a lot of threats in their relations with the Americans, because let's not forget that it was Trump who voiced the idea of bigger tariffs against China in order to get Russians to negotiating table. So basically, China is under constant risks and threats from helping Russia. And helping Russia does not provide any substantial benefits, because Russia, they cannot win single-handedly. They cannot move as fast as before. They cannot acquire victory as easy as they promised. And they're basically just begging for more support, for more time, for more resources, and providing nothing from their own side except for cheap natural raw resources. So yeah, China is the only one who can stop Russia. However, the collective West and Ukraine will hear a price. I do believe that the main point for us here will be meeting between Trump and Xi in April. And so for his abstinence, for his passiveness, for his not doing anything to help Russia, Xi will ask for, I don't know, maybe better trading opportunities, maybe a more reliable situation when it comes to trade wars. Maybe he will ask for more technological areas of advancement, for example, 5G technology, where China is still very much constrained by Western sanctions and Western technological complexes. Maybe China will ask for more access there. Maybe China will ask for more access to the northwestern route, I mean trading route through the Arctic. So there are a lot of things that China can ask for in exchange for the stoppage of Russian aggression and in exchange for basically doing nothing about it. And for my final point, I do believe that the strongest point of Chinese diplomacy, they can still win and they can still acquire more resources and more beneficial attitude even when they're doing nothing. That's just the way it works.
Oleksandr, and about security, again, President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that he has arrived in Germany, where new steps will be taken for joint security. What concrete security outcomes are expected from Ukrainians' participation in the 2026 Munich Security Conference? Your own expectations?
Unfortunately, I don't have any specific expectations as for this conference. I'm still kind of worrying that even the absence of J.D. Vance or Donald Trump himself will not provide for a better and more constructive American-European or American-Ukrainian dialogue, because Rubio, although being a more conservative kind of guy, and although being a more on the professional side of the issues, Rubio is still part of this administration. Rubio is still the architect of the Venezuela operation. And so Rubio is still a part of the problem, not the part of the solution. So previous year, you do remember that when J.D. Vance made his famous speech at Munich Security Conference, everybody was shocked because the Americans proclaimed the new era, the era of divorce between the US and Europe. And that was a political shockwave throughout the whole continent. Everybody are still talking about it, but this year when Rubio will be here, Rubio who is trusted by European diplomacy, and Rubio who is approached by everybody when it comes to Trump and when it comes to Trump's unpredictability, I do believe Rubio will be predictable, but predictable in a way that he will bring a spreadsheet, just a spreadsheet full of numbers. And these numbers will be prices for supporting Ukrainian security guarantees, prices for supporting NATO Eastern flank, prices for PRL initiative, prices for new manufacturing opportunities. So basically, the Americans will tell us what the price for our future security and for our future cooperation is. And I do believe that will be the main result from this conference. I don't think it will be a positive result. That will be an eye-opener for a lot of folks. But at the same time, that will be something that will help us to create a better and a more comprehensive strategy. So one way or another, be it positive or be it negative, I do surely hope that this year's Munich Security Conference will bring us at least more understanding of how our cooperation with Americans and Europeans will proceed throughout the years.
Oleksandr, I hope with this. Thank you so much for the professional analysis, for the important conversation, and for insightful thoughts. Oleksandr Kraiev, expert at Ukrainian Prism think tank, senior lecturer at Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, was with us today. Thank you so much again. I wish you all the best and see you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.